Okay? Oh, sure. I don't have a clicker. I don't need the clicker.
Good afternoon. I'm Dexter Brooks. I'm with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I work primarily with the federal government as an employer. EEOC, for those who don't know what we do at EEOC, we are a law enforcement agency. We enforce statutes that protect individuals from employment discrimination, and we do that in many different ways. We have an office here in San Antonio. They're represented out in our booth, and they'll talk, and you can learn more about the full range of career opportunities with EEOC there. But what we primarily do in the private sector is that a person believes they've been treated differently because of a particular basis, whether it be their disability, whether it be because of their race, their national origin. And if they believe that's the reason why they've been denied opportunity, they have rights in this country that you cannot be denied those opportunities because of specific characteristics. So you can go to one of our field offices. We have 53 field offices throughout the country, and file a charge of discrimination. So, and what we'll do, we'll assign it to an intake person, we'll investigate it, we'll determine if there's cause to believe there was discrimination. If it's a case that's egregious enough that we think we can make some type of headway, we will actually sue the company for the employee in federal court. So sometimes you'll hear about EEOC and it's in conjunction with a lawsuit. So you'll hear things like some of our more popular cases like EEOC versus Mitsubishi, EEOC versus Waffle House, EEOC versus Hooters, because they wouldn't accept guys as Hooter girls, so we sued them. EEOC versus Walmart, EEOC versus Walmart, EEOC versus Walmart, and EEOC versus Walmart. And it's not because Walmart's bad. They're the nation's second largest employer, so they have a higher propensity to be sued. The nation's largest employer is the federal government. And so at EEOC, we do not sue the federal government. The federal government is a colleague. We are part of the federal government, but we have an oversight responsibility unique to the federal government. Through our statutes, Congress had thought that the federal government should be the model employer. When folks were looking for an employment opportunity, the one place they should be able to look and not worry about potential discrimination and exclusion should be the federal government. So in terms of our role in the federal government, we provide oversight and guidance. We actually do have a litigation process that's unique in the federal sector that we control, but we also do oversight for the federal community. And in my responsibility, we look at the federal government as an employer. One of the things that the Deputy Director had mentioned earlier is that we track statistics. We've been tracking statistics on the federal government as it pertains to disability since 1973, really for our agency since 1980, on how well are we doing in terms of attracting and providing opportunity for individuals with disabilities. After the Vietnam War, we saw an influx of veterans who came back with disabilities and very few employment opportunities. So Congress made strong action to ensure that the federal government had means available to give folks, not just veterans, but all folks with disability an opportunity to work in the federal government. So we've been tracking trends, and the federal government did really well in the early 80s of hiring folks with disabilities, but we were hiring them in jobs that we call non-career mission critical. There are some jobs that within an agency, if you're in that job, you're going to always have a job, because that's what they do to accomplish their mission. So some of the agencies you see here today, like NSA, some of their mission-critical occupations would be intelligence analysts. If they didn't have intelligence analysts, they wouldn't exist at an agency. At EEOC, if we didn't have investigators and attorneys, we wouldn't exist as an agency. What we found in the 80s, while those numbers of hiring individuals with disabilities went up, it was not in the mission-critical category. So it was a fictitious inflation of the numbers. So they were hired in mailrooms and in cafeterias, in places where as the government started doing more contracting, we saw the numbers go down. So we saw a 20-year trend of tracking employment of individuals with severe disabilities go down. And, we put out guidance and things of that nature, but we started to study it a little bit more over the last 5 to 6 years of what can we do to help the federal government maximize opportunity for individuals with disabilities, in particular targeted disabilities. And in that same time frame, there was this force that entered EEOC by the name of Christine Griffin, who's now the Deputy Director of OPM. She was a commissioner at EEOC. She doesn't advertise that because that was one of the low points of her career.
No, that was actually one of the best parts.
Yeah, and she came over and she started an initiative to really help us focus on looking at issues with individuals with disabilities. And what we found, I usually say there are three, and we put out a report in 2008 about how the federal government could do better in terms of opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And there were three things that were really holding the federal government back from being a model employer. And I always call them the 3 A's. This is just mine, so you don't worry about it. It's just accountability. There's no accountability from top leadership. Everybody says it's a good thing to hire with individuals with disabilities. As a civil rights professional who's been doing this for almost 20 years, when I first got into civil rights, full disclosure, I was really concerned about race discrimination. That was my focus, the civil rights movement, Dr. King, things. But once you're at EEOC, you have a whole host of responsibilities. And disability was something that I didn't really grasp as well because I'm not an individual with a disability. And well, I shouldn't say that so confidently. I'm not sure. Yeah, but I'm not an individual with disability, so I didn't understand the issues. So I had to educate myself on some of the issues that surround this. And I found it to be the most complex, the most compelling issues facing the federal government in terms of being a model employer. In the 60s, you would have folks sitting in the front of a university like this saying, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation, and that person became the villain. And then you can start a movement around the villain, right? And so you can get people to action. But when I talk to people about disability, no one hates people with disability on their face. They're like, oh, yeah, it's great, let's hire more. But then when it's time to be accountable, no one stepped up to the plate. So there's no villain there to really vilify, but there's no action. There's no accountability. So accountability was the big issue. And so through the leadership of Christine Griffin and Dinah Cohen and folks who have been doing this far longer than I, we really have some executive orders in place really looking at accountability. So that's the first piece. Then we found the application process was out of whack. That folks really couldn't get through the maze of how do you find a way to apply for a federal job. We're talking about Schedule A because we know it, but for you're sitting there at Schedule A, what is Schedule B? What is Schedule C? Because these are jargon that's unique to us because we've been in the federal government, and it's not a transparent process. So really now we're working on simplifying the hiring process through OPM's leadership. And then the final one is accommodation, reasonable accommodation. That's the portion, it took me that long just to get to my first slide.
Can I just say, Dexter's being very modest and giving us all credit, but when I got to EEOC, there was a group of people that really cared about this and were already working on it, and Dexter was leading that group. And the red team? And Ready team. And it really was, it was great because I got there and it really just became aware of the problem. I didn't know that the federal government was doing such a lousy job. And, with folks there that were already caring about this and looking into it, it was easy to be able to lead a charge and say we're going to make this better. So he really has done a lot of work in this area.
Well, if the statistics are any result, I've been there a long time, statistics keep going down. So I'll try not to link myself to the statistics.
I used to actually wonder if I should blame myself. I thought maybe I'm talking too much about this. It's actually getting worse every time I talk about it.
So the third A was accommodation, reasonable accommodation. It's this term that really confuses folks and it gets them thinking that it's difficult to hire a person with a disability because they need this accommodation. And accommodation sounds like something, when you say it to a hiring manager and you say accommodation, for some reason it just sounds like cha-ching. They think it's money. There's this amazing amount of money, and Dinah's actually going to talk about how we provide accommodations in the federal government in a cost-effective way. But so we've tried to put out a lot of guidance about accommodation and try to demystify what is a reasonable accommodation, and we're trying to boil it down to managers so they understand accommodations and what a person needs to work is that's just what they need. They need tools and access so that they can perform the job. Accommodation is not providing the means so that a person doesn't work. Every person that comes to the federal government is expected to perform their job at the highest levels possible. And there's no less expectation of an individual with a disability. So that's what we're trying to explain to managers. And one thing that we try to show is everyone gets accommodated in the federal government. We get it in different ways. I mean, I stole this. I steal a lot of my presentation from my co-presenters and other folks that I hear over the years. But someone gave a really good presentation one year about accommodation, and it talks about every federal employee, every worker in this country gets accommodated every day by their employer, and they never say thank you. When a person comes to work their first day and they show up to their office, they're given their place to sit, they get a desk, they get a computer, they get a chair, they get lamps, and things of that nature. That's not in their employment contract. When you sign to work for the EEOC or Department of Justice, it's nothing to say you get a chair. But people expect that. They expect that basic accommodation that's going to let them sit there comfortably for 8 hours to do their work. Yeah. And I always joke with them, I said, if we only hired folks in wheelchairs or in mobile devices, we could save billions of dollars. The federal government spends, on average, about $400 per chair. In my office, I have 5 chairs. That's $2,000 worth of money we spent so that someone could be comfortable. Imagine we took all that away. But that's what those folks need to work comfortably. People need lighting. If we only hired blind individuals, we could save billions in lighting. But we provide this for the sighted folks who need it at a certain level. So what we're trying to get managers to understand, and what you really need to do is you're starting your employment opportunity. If you need to request accommodation, don't be afraid. Let them know how this allows you to do the things that propel them to accomplish their mission. And that's the core about accommodation. Don't be afraid to ask for an accommodation, because the lack of accommodation for an employee means you do not have the things you need to successfully perform your job. And if you're not successfully performing your job, it reinforces the stereotype, oh, we shouldn't have hired a person with a disability who can't do the job. So never be afraid to ask for an accommodation, because it's really what the agency needs to accomplish their mission and what you need as an employee. And so in terms of trying to help agencies, we actually use our own reasonable accommodation procedures. Every agency by executive order has to have procedures to accommodate employees in the federal government. It's required. So it's required during the application process. So when you're applying for a job, there should be something there that says if you need an accommodation to participate in the application process, they give you a central contact so that you can participate, whether it be if you need some, if something is not 508 compliant. Is that government speak? Do we all know what 508 compliant means? See?
That's government speak.
That's government speak. That's really government speak. That means that you have online or technology. All federal technology must be accessible to everyone. So if you experience a website or application process that you cannot utilize, that means it's outside of compliance and the federal government is in violation of law. So you need to let the federal government know that, oh, look at some eyes. My eyes got big, really? So obviously you must have experienced something like that. So it's important to know that you're required, the federal government is required to provide accommodation in the application process. Once the interviews take place, once you show up for work, then make sure that you have the tools necessary to accomplish your job. And every agency is supposed to have written procedures that demonstrate how they provide accommodations. EEOC has our own as a federal agency, so we try to lead by example. And what you'll see here, and I don't want to go into too many details in terms of our internal procedures, but we actually put that out there as a guide that is centralized, that we have centralized funds, meaning that San Antonio office only has X amount of money to provide accommodation versus Dallas versus headquarters. It's all in one pot, so that so no one will be treated differently if their office doesn't have sufficient funds. That we have quick time frames, because you don't want to bring someone on board, you know, and as a hiring manager, one of the things that Christine was talking about with Schedule A is you bring someone in on Schedule A, you can bring them in really quick, and I hire through Schedule A often enough to know that it's a wonderful program. Actually, I've hired I think we've hired, out of the last 10 folks that we've hired, we probably hired 4 from Schedule A just because we can get them in the door quicker. But once you get them in the door, you got to have the accommodation set up. So it's frustrating, and this even happens at EEOC. We brought in an employee who needed accommodation. We brought him in so quick that we didn't have the accommodation set up, so it took weeks before this person could be productive. So it's really a lot of thought. So you need careful time frames and how you're going to work with your partners. As Dinah talks, we're one of her customers, and she provides accommodations for our employees. How do we get her the information quick enough so that she can help us have the equipment on for our employees? And then tracking accommodation and usage of programs. And those are some of the models that we provide in our plan. Now, our plan is located on our website, so if you want to see what a federal government should be doing in terms of accommodation of employees, you know, go to our website, pull down our accessible, I hope, our accessible document to actually see what EEOC's accommodation procedures are, from the application process all the way through the employee's employment life. And there's some other helpful information up there for you, some of our policies on reasonable accommodation, some of our our contact for our disability program manager. Her name is Kendra Duckworth. She does a fantastic job bringing in individuals with disabilities. It's very good to have someone. We have a fantastic disability program manager for Department of Defense sitting in the back, Stephen King.
Stephen King.
So
So
if you're looking for a job, civilian job at DOD, folks like that. And so utilizing these resources, and then the last one is the initiative that Ms. Griffin had started at EEOC, the LEAD initiative. And like she said, if you have any questions, I'll answer anything you have at this point. I'm going to turn it over because I feel like I talk too much.
No, you're good, you're good.
And I wear the sign language interpreters out because I speak too fast.
Well, you do pronounce your R's though, which is good.
That's R's for us Texans. R's.
Sound like pirates.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm next. My name is Dinah Cohen, and I'm with the Department of Defense. So who's here from DOD? Hooah! All right. That's one of your bigger employers here in San Antonio. Do I have any federal managers here? Okay, a few federal managers. Hey, how are you in the back? I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Dinah Cohen, and I'm the director of a program in the Department of Defense called the Computer Electronic Accommodations Program, better known as CAP. And I spend a lot of time working with federal managers to make sure they know not only all the laws and regulations, but there's this wonderful resource that can provide them with accommodations. We were established over 20 years ago as a centrally funded program to provide accommodations for DOD employees with disabilities. Based on our success, it was recommended to President Clinton at that time to expand our program to serve other federal agencies. We now have partnerships with 68 other agencies. And why do you need to know that? And that we filled over 98,000 requests for accommodations, is that we hope that when you start looking for a job, and when you start to think of where can I work and how can I get my accommodation, you would know we've got your back. That we've got the accommodations to help you get that federal position. So we're here to tell you about how we do it and how you need to know about it, so when you start the application process, when you start to interview, you can feel comfortable and confident about requesting the accommodation. Our mission is really clear. Our mission is to provide the accommodations and information to make sure that you have the opportunities to work in the federal government. We do it for our employees with disabilities and my newest customers. A lot of them here in San Antonio, my wounded service members. As they come back from war, as they come out of the Brooke Army Medical Center, as they work in various places in San Antonio, we want to make sure that they have the accommodations they need to return to work. So here's what I want you to know. You're my customer. You're the federal employees, I hope, of the future. That as you start to look at opportunities in the federal government, that you will say, these are the kind of jobs I want, and this is where I want to work. So you will be, hopefully, one of my customers. I work closely with a lot of managers who want to hire people with disabilities. They're always kind of concerned, just as Dexter say, I want to bring them on board, they're coming on real fast. What do I need to do to make sure the accommodations are there quickly so their first day they can be as productive as possible? I work with individuals who become disabled, because this, as we all know, is the one and the only population anyone can join at any time. So not only do I work with individuals who are born with disabilities, but those who become disabled. I work closely with managers when they deal with workers' comp issues, with telework issues, and as I mentioned, with my service members. So what do you need to know about how to take advantage of our services? First and foremost, if you are an employee joining the federal sector and you need an accommodation, let me say a couple things about that. Know your accommodation. One of the issues that I find as a person who recruits people with disabilities, that hires people with disabilities, every once in a while I will find an applicant who's not that sure what they need. So you need to make sure you feel comfortable and confident about your accommodations need. You need to make sure that you can express your accommodations in the most positive light and understand what it is. You also need to understand that if you're going to work for company X, that they may have a different technical background or infrastructure, as we call it. So what you may have used may not be what you can use. So you have to understand the different technologies that may be out there. So be comfortable, be confident about the accommodations you may need. Be able to talk about it in that interview. If you don't know, because a lot of us who are born with disabilities, I'm one of them. I came into the federal government under Schedule A. I'm a person with a disability. Many of us assume that certain things will be there because they've always been there. Well, they've probably been there if you were born with a disability because you got that strong parent to make sure that everything is done right. But now you're on your own. Now you have to convince me that you are my employee of the future. So you need to know your assistive technology. And you need to know that CAP can provide it for you, or if you're coming through the voc rehab service, that they will provide it. But come in with that air of confidence of your skills and abilities. Accommodations is just a tool, but you got to know your tools. Be prepared and be comfortable with your tools. So we provide the accommodations. If by some nature you don't know what you need, CAP and other places, voc rehab can provide you with information opportunity of looking and demonstrating and testing the different technologies on what would work for you. So make sure you go through that process. We support all the federal agencies when it comes to installation integration. You heard already this kind of term, Section 508. What it means is that whenever we put a database together, whenever we develop a website, whenever we put something out there, that we want not only all of our employees with disabilities to use it, but all of the public. Because you pay my salary, and I'm really hoping for a raise, but you pay my salary, you're the taxpayer. So we want everything we do to be accessible to you. So here, that's what 508 is about. So we want to make sure that we help with the installation integration. I do a lot of training with these wonderful people around the country about how to use Section 508, how to comply with the regulations, and how to use CAP. So we do that quite a bit. And we, of course, are all here to support the federal regulations. This is just a more from manager snapshot as we continue that conversation about what is a reasonable accommodation procedure. We talk a lot about making sure that everyone knows, including the applicant, about the procedures at the agency they're looking to be employed in. There is information there. We advocate for managers to have it centrally funded for the things that CAP does not provide. We ask people to make sure they know of other resources, not just CAP, but the Job Accommodation Network. How many of you know about JAN? Great, great resource. So even if you're an applicant and you're not sure about some of the things, call them, ask them questions. We try to get all federal agencies to have regular trainings on what they need to do when it comes to reasonable accommodation, making sure that all the technologies work together. One of our challenges now is the new technologies are always coming out. Like, everyone knows about the TTY, but people want to use deaf want to use video phones now. Well, that means all sorts of different technical requirements. So we try to make sure that that's being happening, that they have the ability to use a video phone no matter where they work. So we do a lot of that compliance issue. Here's a snapshot of some of the things that you can get free of charge from CAP if you become a federal employee. We divide our program office into teams. So we talk about the team that deals with the issues for people with dexterity disabilities. Some of us will have some dexterity disability, may need different keyboards, pointing devices, or at the high end, voice recognition technology. This is something that you think you need to be comfortable talking about it and what you use. For some of us who have vision impairments, now some of us, I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I've noticed some of us, as we get older, we find the print in the phone book has gone a lot smaller. So some of us will have vision disabilities and will need an accommodation. Some people are born blind and prefer Braille, so we provide that kind of technology. Screen readers. Some people just need print enlargement, so we provide that for the federal employees. Whether it's a hardware solution or a software solution, you need to know your solutions. When we talk about people with hearing loss, many people are deaf, need interpreters. But what we provide is more of the hardware and the software solutions, whether they may need, in a meeting environment, assistive technology like assistive listening devices. A lot of our wounded warriors are coming home. And if you've heard it, you're in San Antonio, where a lot of them come here because of your wonderful health care here, and Brooke Army Medical Center and the Center for the Intrepid. IEDs are the things that are causing our men and women to come home with massive injuries. They've been hurt by an IED, chances are they have some level of a hearing loss. So we provide that kind of technology, or the video phones for some people who are deaf, or the TTYs. And we advocate for captioning, because not only is captioning required, it's an incredible tool for people who English is not their native language, for people who may be working in a noisy environment and can't even see what's happening on the TV screen. I always say the number one place that you can always see captioning on TV is our sports bars. Now, do you think in the sports bars they really care about deaf and hard of hearing people? Nah. It's when you're in the sports bar, you're all deaf and hard of hearing. So it's a whole concept that if you want to know what's going on, you got to read the captioning. So it becomes a very powerful tool for all. Because of the injuries that our young men and women are coming back with, we find that many of them are coming back with traumatic brain injuries. So we provide a lot of tools to help them as they come through recovery and rehabilitation. Some other tools to help them with their memory. Some of them can see, but they can't process the information the way they used to process information because of the injuries of war. So we provide tools to help that, cueing information. Sometimes they'll use a combination of tools that blind people use, like literacy software and voice output software. Many of them are coming back with missing hands, lost vision, and traumatic brain injury. So we work together to put all those tools together to make them successful. So and then if you think, well, I don't really need anything that sophisticated, but I just need a little bit of help, then a lot of things are already embedded in your technology. If you use any of the Microsoft products, a lot of that technology is already embedded, so I encourage you to check it out. If you come to the Washington area, just even for fun, I encourage you to visit our technology center. We have a wonderful center that has all this technology. You can probably see it through Folk Rehab here locally, but it's always great to see the technology so you know what is out there, and you know what you need. And you know how to talk about it during that interview if you need to use any assistive technology. So we encourage you to go to a technology center, and if you're in the Washington area, come visit CapTech. So we talk a lot about this model employer, and I want to talk a little bit about how we work at CAP to support that model employer. One of the programs I'm most proud of is called the Workforce Recruitment Program. Any of you know about this? Okay, great. Because this is a program, we come down here, we've interviewed at this university, we interviewed at other universities here in San Antonio. It is a great way to start your federal career. One of the things it does, it's sponsored by Department of Defense and Department of Labor. The person that really heads up the program in the Department of Defense is Stephen King in the back. He does and coordinates it for all of DOD, and I provide the accommodations, not only for DOD, but for all of our WRP students. The thing I like most about it is that you do have managers who want to start hiring people with disabilities, but they're a little bit uncomfortable. They're not sure what to expect. So WRP becomes a great avenue because first and foremost, it's a short-term program. And if by any chance it doesn't work out, guess what? Summer's over. So it's not a long-term commitment. But I have seen time and time and time again that manager that says, I don't know about hiring people with disabilities. They hire a WRP student. All of a sudden, it's not a WRP student. It's not a student with a disability. It's Sue. It's Mike. It's Jim. It's their future employee.